Chapter 2 Mad or Sane? It would have been the end of Lucky if he and Mindy's had been on Earth. Lucky had not missed the gathering madness in Mindy's voice. He'd been waiting carefully for some break, some action to suit the violence of the engineer's hard-breathed sentences. Yet he had not entirely expected an outright assault with the blaster. When Mindy's hand flashed to his holster, Lucky leaped to one side. On Earth, that movement would have come too late. On Mercury, however, matters were different. Mercury's gravity was 2/5 that of Earth, and Lucky's contracting muscles threw his abnormally light body, even including the suit he wore, farther to one side. Mindy's, unaccustomed to low gravity, stumbled as he turned too quickly in order that his blaster might follow Lucky's motion. The blaster's energy, therefore, struck bare ground, inches from Lucky's sinking body. It gouged a foot-deep hole into the frigid rock. Before Mindy's could recover and aim again, Bigman had struck him at the end of a long, low tackle, carried through with the natural grace of a born Martian accustomed to low gravity. Mindy's went down. He shrieked wordlessly and then was silent, whether unconscious as the result of the fall or as the climax of his fevered emotions could not be told. Bigman did not believe either possibility. "He's shammin'," he cried passionately. "That dirty cob is playing dead." He had wrenched the blaster from the fallen engineer's unresisting grip, and now he pointed it at the man's head. Lucky said sharply, "None of that, Bigman." Bigman hesitated. "He tried to kill you, Lucky." It was obvious that the little Martian would not have been half as angry if it had merely been himself who had been in danger of death. Yet he backed away. Lucky was on his knees, examining Mindy's face through the faceplate, shining his helmet light onto the other's pale, drawn features. He checked the pressure gauge of Mindy's suit, making sure the shock of the fall had not loosened any of its joints. Then, seizing the fallen figure by a wrist and ankle, he slung it across his shoulders and rose to his feet. "Back to the dome," he said. "And I'm afraid to a problem that's a little more complicated than the chief thinks." Bigman grunted and followed Lucky's long stride closely, his own smaller build forcing him into the gravity-lengthened half-trot. He kept his blaster ready, maneuvering his position to enable him, in case of need, to strike at Mindy's without blasting down Lucky. The chief was Hector Conway, head of the Council of Science. At more informal times, he was called Uncle Hector by Lucky, since it was Hector Conway, along with Augustus Henry, who were the guardians of the young Lucky after the death of Lucky's parents as a result of the pirate attack near the orbit of Venus. A week earlier, Conway had said to Lucky with a casual air, almost as though he was offering him a vacation, "How would you like to go to Mercury, Lucky?" "What's up, Uncle Hector?" asked Lucky. "Nothing really," said Conway, frowning, "except some cheap politics. We're supporting a rather expensive project up at Mercury. One of those basic research things that may come to nothing, you know, and on the other hand may turn out to be quite revolutionary. That's a gamble. All those things are." Lucky said, "Is it anything I know about?" "I don't think so. It's quite recent. Anyway, Senator Swenson has pounced on it as an example of how the council wastes taxpayers' money. You know the line. He's pressing for an investigation, and one of his boys went out to Mercury some months ago." "Senator Swenson, I see." Lucky nodded. This was nothing new. The Council of Science over the past decade had slowly come to the fore of the fight against the dangers to Earth, from both within and without the solar system. In this age of galactic civilization, of humanity spread through all the planets of the stars in the Milky Way, only scientists could properly cope with mankind's problems. In fact, only the specially trained scientists of the Council were adequate. Yet there were some men of Earth's government who feared the growing power of this Council of Science, and others who used the suspicion to further their own ambitions. Senator Swenson was the foremost of the latter group. His attacks, usually directed against the Council's wasteful way of supporting research, were making him famous. Lucky said, "Who's in charge of the project on Mercury? Anyone I know?" "It's called Project Light, by the way, and the man in charge is an engineer named Scott Mindy, a bright boy, but he's not the man to handle this. The most embarrassing thing is that since Swenson kicked up this fuss, all sorts of things have been going wrong with Project Light." I'll look into it if you wish, Uncle Hector. Good. The accidents and bad breaks are nothing, I'm sure, but we don't want Swenson to maneuver us into some bad-looking spot. See what he's up to, and watch out for that man of his. Yertail is his name, and he has a reputation of being a capable and dangerous fellow. So that was all it started out as. Just a bit of investigation to forestall political difficulties, nothing more. Lucky landed on Mercury's North Pole expecting nothing more, and in 2 hours found himself at the wrong end of a blaster bolt. Lucky thought as he slogged back to the dome with Mindy's over his shoulders, there's more than just a bit of politics here. Dr. Carl Gardoma stepped out of his small hospital room and faced Lucky and Bigman somberly. He was wiping his strong hands on a pad of fluffy plastozorb, which he tossed into the disposal unit when he finished. His dark-complexioned face, almost brown, was disturbed, his heavy eyebrows lowering. Even his black hair, cut so close that it stood up stiffly in thick array, seemed to accentuate his troubled appearance. "Well, Doctor?" said Lucky. Dr. Godona said, "I've got him under sedation. He'll be all right when he wakes up. I don't know if he'll remember clearly what happened." "Has he had attacks like this before?" "Not since he came to Mercury, Mr. Starr. I don't know what happened before then, but these last few months he's been under great strain." "Why?" "He feels responsible for the accidents that have been interfering with the process of Project Light." "Is he responsible?" "No, of course not, but you can see how he feels. He's sure everyone blames him. Project Light is vitally important. A great deal of money and effort has been put into it. Mindy's is in charge of 10 construction men, all 5 to 10 years older than he is, and of an enormous amount of equipment." "How does it happen that he's so young?" The doctor smiled grimly, but despite his grimness, his white, even teeth made him look pleasant, even charming. He said, "Subether optics, Mr. Starr, is a completely new branch of science. Only young men, fresh out of school, know enough about it." "You sound as though you know a bit about it yourself." "Only what Mindy's told me. We arrived in Mercury on the same ship, you know, and he fascinated, quite won me over with what his project hopes to accomplish. Do you know about it?" "Not a thing." "Well, it involves hyperspace, that portion of space that lies outside the ordinary boundary of space we know. The laws of nature that apply to ordinary space don't apply to hyperspace. For instance, in ordinary space, it is impossible to move faster than the speed of light, so that it would take at least 4 years to reach the nearest star. In going through hyperspace, any speed is possible." The physician broke off with a sudden and apologetic smile. "You know all this, I'm sure." "I'm sure that most people know about the discovery of hyperspatial flight made travel to the stars possible," said Lucky. "But what about Project Light?" "Well," said Dr. Gardoma, "in ordinary space, light travels in a straight line in a vacuum. It can only be bent by large gravitational forces. In hyperspace, however, it can bend as easily as if it were a cotton thread. It can be focused, dispersed, bent back upon itself. That's what the theory of hyperoptics says." "And Scott Mindy's, I suppose, is here to test that theory." "That's right." "Why here?" asked Lucky. "I mean, why on Mercury?" "Because there's no other planetary surface in the solar system where there's such a concentration of light over so large an area. The effects Mindy's is looking for can be detected most easily here. It would be 100 times as expensive to set up the project on Earth, and the results would be 100 times as uncertain. So Mindy's tells me." "Only now we're having these accidents." Dr. Gardoma snorted. "There's no accidents. And Mr. Starr, they have to be stopped. Do you know what the success of Project Light would mean?" He drove on, caught up in the vision. Earth would no longer be the slave of the sun. Space stations circling Earth could intercept sunlight, push it into hyperspace, and spread it evenly over the Earth. The desert heat and polar cold would vanish. The seasons would be rearranged to our liking. We could control the weather by controlling the distribution of sunlight. We could have eternal sunlight where we wanted it, night of any length where we wanted it. Earth would be an air-conditioned paradise." "It would take time, I imagine." "A great deal of it, but this is the beginning. Look, I may be out of order here, but aren't you the David Starr who cleared up the matter of food poisoning on Mars?" There was an edge to Lucky's voice as he answered, and his brows contracted slightly. "What makes you think so?" Dr. Gardoma said, "I am a physician, after all. Poisonings at first seemed to be a disease epidemic, and I was much interested in it at the time. There were rumors about a young councilman's having played the chief role in straightening the mystery, and names were mentioned. Lucky said, "Suppose we let it go at that." He was displeased, as always, at any intimation that he was becoming well known. First Mindes, now Gardoma. Dr. Gardoma said, "But if you are Starr, that Starr you're here, I hope, to stop these so-called accidents." Lucky did not seem to hear. He said, "When will I be able to talk to Scott Mindes, Dr. Gardoma?" "Not for at least 12 hours. "And will he be rational?" "I'm certain of that." A new guttural baritone broke in. "Are you Gardoma? Is that because you know our boy Mindes was never irrational?" Dr. Gardoma whirled at the sound and made no effort to hide the look of acute dislike on his face. "What are you doing here, Yertail?" "Keeping my eyes and ears open, though I suppose you'd rather I keep them closed," the newcomer said. Both Lucky and Bigman were staring at him curiously. He was a large man, not tall, but broad of shoulder and thick-muscled. His cheeks were blue with stubble, and there was a rather unpleasant air of self-assurance about him. Dr. Gardoma said, "I don't care what you do with your eyes and ears, but not in my office if you don't mind." "Why not in your office?" demanded Yertil. "You're a doctor. Patients have a right to come in. Maybe I'm a patient." "What's your complaint?" "How about these two? What are their complaints? Hormophone deficiency for one thing, I suppose." His eyes fell lazily on Bigman Jones as he said that. There was a breathless interlude in which Bigman turned a deathly white and then seemed to swell. Slowly he rose from his seat, his eyes round and staring. His lips moved as though forming the words hormone deficiency, as though he were trying to convince himself that he had actually heard the words and that it was no illusion. Then, with the speed of a cobra striking, Bigman's 5'2" of cord-whipped muscle launched itself at the broad, sneering figure before him. But Lucky moved faster. His hand shot downward, catching Bigman at each shoulder. "Easy, Bigman." The small Martian struggled desperately. "You heard him, Lucky, you heard him!" "Not now, Bigman." Yertil's laugh was a series of sharp barks. "Let him go, fella. I'll smooth the little boy of the flow of my finger." Bigman howled and writhed in Lucky's grip. Lucky said, "I wouldn't say anything else, Yertil, or you might be in a kind of trouble your senator friend won't be able to get you out of." His eyes had become brown ice as he spoke, and his voice was smooth steel. Yertil's glance locked with Lucky's for a moment and then fell away. He mumbled something about joking. Bigman's harsh breathing calmed somewhat, and as Lucky slowly released his grip, the Martian took his seat, still trembling with almost unbearable fury. Dr. Gardoma, who had watched that bit of play by tensely, said, "You know Mr. Yertil, Mr. Starr?" "By reputation. He's Jonathan Yertil, Senator Swenson's roving investigator." "Well, call it that," muttered the physician. "And I know you too, David Starr, Lucky Starr, whatever you call yourself," said Yertil. "You're the roving wonder boy for the Council of Science. Mars poisonings, asteroid pirates, Venusian telepathy. Do I have the list correct?" "You have," said Lucky tonelessly. Yertil grinned triumphantly. "There isn't much the Senator's office doesn't know about the Council of Science, and there isn't much I don't know about things happening here. For instance, I know about the attempt on your life, and I've come to see you about it." "Why?" "To give you a little warning, just a friendly little warning. I suppose the medic here has been telling you what a nice guy Mindes is. Just a momentary splash of unbearable strain he's telling you, I suppose. They're great friends, Mindes and he." "I just said," began Dr. Gardoma. "Let me say," said Yertil. "Let me say this. Scott Mindes is about as harmless as a 2-ton asteroid headed for a spaceship. He wasn't temporarily insane when he pointed a blaster at you. He knew what you were doing. He tried to kill you in cold blood, Starr, and if you don't watch out, he'll succeed next time. Because you can bet your small friend's Martian hip boots he'll try again."